Today on NewsWatch.
It's a miracle, frankly, when you see the devastation that there were no deaths.
Severe storms sweep across the United States. We'll show you the damage and where more bad weather is expected.
I was not afraid. Death is with all of us at any time.
Plus, she faced a death sentence for her face, why she says questioning God was never an option. And saying sorry, how British Christians are making amends for preventing thousands of Jews from reaching their biblical homeland. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Ephraim Graham. Severe storms pummeled the East Coast overnight, leaving nearly 500,000 people without power, downing trees and ripping homes apart. States of emergency already declared for some parts of the Northeast, and more severe weather is expected today. Our Caitlin Burke is on the story.
The severe weather system responsible for creating damage across the Midwest Monday moved into the Northeast Tuesday night just in time to disrupt the evening commute. Violent storms knocked out power to more than 500,000 people, at one point leaving more than 700,000 in the dark. In Philadelphia, wind gusts of close to 70 miles per hour were recorded as the storm moved through, damaging homes and ripping trees from the ground.
It was the crazy winds. They were coming straight down the street, and I was actually on my porch. It was scary for a couple of minutes.
It was awful. The sky got really dark, all this rain, wind. It just devastated our backyard, our neighbors. The shingles were blowing off, the trees were falling down.
In the Midwest, residents are cleaning up from Monday's storms and bracing for more severe weather. The National Weather Service confirmed that an EF3, EF2, and EF1 tornado all touched down Monday in central Illinois.
It's a miracle, frankly, when you see the devastation that there were no deaths and no really life-threatening injuries. We're very blessed, but when you look and see how devastating the storm was, we're very blessed in that regard.
Coal City, Illinois saw the worst of Monday's storms. That's where that EF3 tornado touched down.
Just cars upside down, trees on houses.
All the glass just exploded, like a big vacuum, and our ears popped and boom.
Today, a new set of storms expected to hit the Midwest. Forecasters warn that they could continue through the end of the week. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
The Pentagon is sending U.S. military forces into former Soviet bloc nations to counter Russian aggression. The force consists of 250 tanks, armored vehicles, and other military equipment. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter also pledged U.S. aircraft and other forces to a NATO rapid reaction force. NATO allies are worried after Russia took Crimea from Ukraine and is now backing anti-government rebels in the east. Carter said the U.S. is not seeking a confrontation with Russia, but we will defend our allies in the region.
We will stand up to Russia's actions and their attempts to reestablish a Soviet-era sphere of influence. The United States will not let Russia drag us back to the past.
U.S. forces will be spread among Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. ISIS is celebrating the month of Ramadan by giving away female slaves as prizes for a Koran memorization contest. The Clarion Project reports that in honor of Islam's holiest month, the Islamic State launched the contest throughout the Al-Baraka province in Syria. On a Twitter announcement, it invites participants to memorize some of the most warlike passages in the Quran. The prizes are girl slaves for the first 3 places and money for the rest. ISIS has been kidnapping women from Christian and other religious minorities in the region. A North Carolina teen has been charged with planning to kill a large number of U.S. citizens for ISIS. Investigators say 19-year-old Justin Sullivan was turned in by his own father. After the tip, an undercover FBI agent contacted Sullivan, who told the agent he had converted to Islam and was a mujahid for Islamic holy warrior. Sullivan reportedly was planning to buy an AR-15 rifle to gun down people at a bar or a concert. Authorities say he also planned to use a biological bomb to kill 1,000 people. Sullivan is believed to have been radicalized after watching ISIS propaganda on social media. Israel warned civilians before launching airstrikes, then Hamas put civilians in the way of those bombs. Now the UN is accusing Israel of war crimes. The United Nations reports on last summer's Gaza war implies Israel deliberately killed civilians. As Chris Mitchell reports, Israel is rejecting those accusations.
Israel says the 200-page report was politically motivated and morally flawed from the outset. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blasted the council.
The United Nations Human Rights Council has a singular obsession with Israel. It has passed more resolutions against Israel than against Syria, North Korea, and Iran combined. In fact, it's passed more resolutions against Israel than against all the countries of the world combined.
Last week, senior generals from the U.S. and other NATO countries released their own independent report. They said that Israel not only met international standards regarding the laws of armed conflict, but in many cases significantly exceeded those standards. Some are saying that Israel's standard is so high, it challenges other Western nations. During the 50-day conflict, the UN Commission said 1,462 Palestinian civilians were killed, a third of them children. It criticized Israel for disproportionate force and failing to change its tactics during the war when civilians were killed, even though Israel warned civilians in several ways.
But it's hard for me to see how Israel could have done better. In other words, what could it have done more than warn the people the way they did? What could it have done more than make phone calls to individuals inside buildings about to be attacked?
Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Advocate David Benjamin is the former IDF chief legal advisor for the Gaza Strip. While the report says Hamas launched more than 4,800 rockets and 1,700 mortars at Israel, it stops short of blaming Hamas for starting the war.
It kind of puts the blockade against Gaza as being maybe the root cause. Doesn't suggest that actually the blockade is there because of Hamas terrorism.
Ironically, Hamas also rejected the findings of the report because of its comparison between Israel and Hamas.
I think that the fatal mistake and big problem in this report that all the time they try to make kind of comparison.
Mary McGowan Davis, chair of the commission, said they don't have the evidence to prove war crimes were committed.
It's a great source of regret that on this occasion we could not travel to Israel and the occupied territory to meet them face to face.
Well, there's a built-in problem, is that most of the decisions to attack certain buildings or targets are based on secret intelligence. And that secret intelligence you can't have the enemy knowing about.
Palestinians intend to use the report when they file claims of war crimes against Israel at the International Criminal Court. Benjamin said it's a great propaganda tool for them, even if it doesn't have much substance. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Turning now to health news, the case for medical marijuana may be overstated. That is the conclusion of a review in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The journal analyzed 79 studies involving more than 6,000 patients and says there's not enough evidence to show the drug helps many conditions it's supposed to, including anxiety, sleep disorders, and Tourette syndrome. The review did find evidence marijuana is effective for treating chronic pain and muscle stiffness in multiple sclerosis. Medical marijuana is legal in 23 states and the District of Columbia. Most Americans are too fat. A new study shows 3/4 of men and 2/3 of women are now obese or overweight. That is an increase of more than 10% since the 1990s. Researchers at Washington University School of Medicine studied information on more than 15,000 men and women ages 25 and older from 2007 to 2012. From that survey, they estimate 67.6 million Americans were obese in 2012 and 65.2 million were overweight. She was held in a Sudanese prison facing a death sentence for her Christian faith. Now, 1 year later, Miriam Ibrahim is free to tell her own story. The deadline for a potential nuclear deal with Iran is days away. A nonprofit called the Clarion Project is using a short film series to break down the dangers of a nuclear deal with Iran. CBN spoke with the group about what this deal could mean for America.
When Iran gets billions and billions of dollars as a result of this nuclear deal, it will not only be funneled back into their nuclear program, but back into the terrorist apparatus that is helping to kill our soldiers in Afghanistan and will likely kill our soldiers in Iraq as well. So there's a very real cost here.
To learn more about the Clarion Project's film series, log on to cbnnews.com. This week marks the 1,000th day since Pastor Saeed Abedini has been imprisoned in Iran for his Christian faith. Supporters of Saeed gathered in Washington to place 1,000 flowers in front of the Capitol in honor of Saeed and other persecuted Christians around the world. Reverend Patrick Mahoney held a prayer vigil calling for Pastor Saeed's release and urging Congress to act immediately.
We cannot move forward with an Iranian nuclear deal while Pastor Saeed is in prison, as well as 3 other Americans. We believe that as Christians pray around the world, we can see Pastor Saeed's release.
Reverend Mahoney is calling on legislators to make Saeed's return a top priority. Just 1 year ago, Miriam Ibrahim was in a Sudanese prison facing a death sentence. Her crime? Being a Christian. Her 1-year-old was by her side, and she gave birth to a second child inside a jail cell. I spoke with her about the remarkable story on the 1-year anniversary of her miraculous release from prison. Miriam Ibrahim stands center stage to thank American audiences for prayers and for protest for her freedom. Just a year ago, in Muslim-dominated Sudan, Miriam was in prison, facing death. A court sentenced her to be flogged, then hanged for being a Christian and also marrying one. Were you worried that you were going to die in prison?
I was not afraid. Death is with all of us at any time.
Ibrahim's quiet courage is strong. So strong, I can feel it just sitting across from her. She spent 5 months in prison with her 1-year-old at her side and gave birth to a second child inside the jail cell. How are the children?
My children are doing okay. Their health status are okay, except for Maya. I'm a bit worried about her health in the future due to her being born in prison.
Do you still think about the time in prison in Sudan?
What I saw in prison, nothing is fair. Even if you have a small crime, they will give you big sentences for it, which is not worth it. I feel like it's not fair at all, especially women. There's a lot of Christian women who are in prison there, so they get sentences as they were Muslims, and that's not fair.
So, I mean, they could die.
It happened. It's a lot, especially the children who are there with their mothers.
They kill the children too.
They're not intentionally killing them, but the situation and the difficulties in prison are killing them.
Miriam and her baby survived the harsh conditions and reunited with her husband, Daniel, for the journey to his home in New Hampshire. The trip included a stop in Italy for an audience with the Pope. Many in the world followed your story and were praying for you and were happy to see you make it to the U.S. Is there anything about your story that we don't know that you want us to know?
My story is very long. All the things that you guys saw on the media was just the last-minute things.
It's also a story Miriam and her husband are fighting to share themselves. Producers stopped plans for a movie after the couple spoke out against it. And an Italian journalist has written a book. But Miriam is at work, writing the story only she can tell. Did you ever sit and ask God, why me? Why me?
No. I never asked God, why me? But I accepted the fact that it was a test from God.
What did that experience in prison do to your Christian faith?
Being in prison strengthened my faith even more and more. And I'm sure deep inside that the other side of the Islamic are not happy with what I did.
Miriam's brave stand is bringing her honor in America, like receiving the President's Award from the National Religious Broadcasters Association. What does your family and you need most right now?
The most thing that my family needs is for my husband to get employed and for myself to get my paperwork done and able for me to help everyone dream, to live happy, to live in peace and in good health. That's all I asked for. And that's what I want for my family.
Would you go back to Sudan?
I will hope to do that one day.
And what do you want to do there?
I will do God's will. If He has a job for me there, I always dreamed of helping others in Sudan, and I will hope for God to bring that to pass. All I can do is help others just like I was helped.
Her heart to help begins at home in Sudan, but Miriam hopes to someday serve persecuted Christians around the world. And one of the biggest needs for that family right now is a van that is equipped for her husband to be able to drive. They're close to raising funds for that. The British government prevented thousands of Jews from finding safety during the Holocaust. Up next, hear how British Christians are making amends. Some 70 years ago, the British government prevented thousands of Jews from reaching their biblical homeland. Now, British Christians want to apologize and make amends. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has this story.
You're late.
I am trying to save a Jewish child.
Lady, you're 10 years late. Almost 2 million Jewish children were butchered like animals because nobody wanted them.
The renowned movie Exodus, starring Paul Newman as a Jew, depicts the events that happened around World War II. For 10 years, the British body overseeing Palestine turned away thousands of Jews escaping Europe. This Haifa port was known as the Dock of Tears. From 1938 to 1948, the British prevented more than 90 ships from docking here. They were carrying tens of thousands of Jews fleeing Europe, trying to return to their biblical homeland.
I'm here to commemorate those Jews who suffered or died as a result of the shameful policies of the British government of the day.
We turned them away and we put them in camps in Cyprus and in Mauritius, and even some of them were returned to deportation camps in Germany, and others who weren't turned away from their land were actually incarcerated here in this detention camp.
The British basically locked up thousands of Jewish refugees here at Atlit detention camp. They sprayed the newcomers with pesticide, sent them to the showers, and separated the men from the women. It's part of history often lost between World War II and the founding of the Jewish state. But Rosie Ross and other British Christians didn't forget.
This whole period of British history has been something that's been on my heart for a long time, and the need for people from Britain to really confess and repent for what Britain did at that time.
Ross began the group Repairing the Breach and organized a day of repentance. Some 200 British Christians, as well as Jewish victims of that time, came together first in the Haifa port and then at the detention camp.
As we have taken up confessions and prayers with deep sorrow for our nation's reneging on the Balfour Declaration and turning our back upon the Jewish people.
We know that the past cannot be changed, but it can be redeemed.
The Christians handed out Bibles to mark the incident when a British ship commander ordered the burning of all books in Hebrew and Yiddish, including Bibles. Survivors had mixed reactions to the Christian appeal.
If I forgive them, will it raise the dead? There's no forgiveness, none. Nothing in the world can bring them back.
I wanted to meet other British people to hear from them what their opinion about the events. And now I see that not only it is a meeting, but also to asking for forgiveness. It is very, very important. I'm very glad to be in this event.
Keynote speaker Lord Simon Isaacs-Redding said the British quota on immigration breached their contract with the Jewish people.
That contract was Balfour Declaration in 1917, San Remo Treaty in 1920, and that was all ratified in the Treaty of Versailles in 1923. It was the contract which has essentially the British government broke.
He said there were two reasons.
Appeasing the Arabs and a Labour government which was essentially anti-Jewish.
Redding hopes the British government admits its mistake in time for the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration in 2017. Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, says there's also a message for today.
Not to condemn Israel when it shouldn't be condemned, but to stand up for Israel, to support Israel, as Israel so often supports us.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Haifa Port and Atlit, Israel.
As long as there's breath, there is time for forgiveness and redemption. We'll be right back. Amelia Earhart broke the glass ceiling in 1932 when she became the first female pilot to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, 87 years later, an annual all-female air race commemorates her accomplishment. It is called the Air Race Classic, expands about 2,400 miles. The participants are all women ranging in ages from 17 to 90. Racers make stops at checkpoints in 7 states. CBN News caught up with a pair of young pilots from the Lone Star State who called themselves the Texas Tailwinds before the race began.
I grew up working on cars with my dad, and so when I went to college, I figured I'd one-up him and work on airplanes. So that kind of got me into the aviation world, and then I started flying, and I just got hooked from there.
Sometimes people say the phrase, the sky is the limit, and I've even heard that from pilots before, but I think the sky's not the limit, the sky is home. For pilots, we do spend time in the sky, and for our careers, we're going to be spending more time in the sky, and so I'd like to say that the sky is home, it's not the limit.
The sky is home. It is not the limit. For more information about the race and to track the progress of the team, hashtag Texas Tailwinds, log on to cbnnews.com. And finally, this Wednesday, a word to encourage you. We call it your Wednesday word, and today's word is forgiveness. This brought several popular songs to mind like Let It Go and Shake It Off, and that is what I pray we're all able to do. Remember this, failing to forgive is a prison, but the person who's locked up is you. So why sit in a jail cell when you hold the key to break free? Let's follow the lead of the families we've seen in Charleston this week and freely give forgiveness, knowing that is what our God requires. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com, and tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful day.